And today's conversation is Giving USA 2024, a review of giving of 2023, and the view through synagogue lens. And for those of you who are not familiar, Giving USA are the seminal statistics year to year of giving in America, philanthropy in America, and it's quoted in all the media, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, professional journals, lay journals, mainstream media, and other outlets, and is really the gold standard in terms of being able to understand the role of philanthropy in American life, which is an essential part of kind of the rhythm of the American experience. So first, I want to start with just a big number. All right, and a big number that comes with a little bit of a tinge. And first of all, the big number is that giving in America in 2023 reached an astounding number of $557 billion in current dollars. There was a little bit of a decrease. Given the impact of inflation. You see the spike, the third column from the right, the spike during the 2020, during the year of COVID, when giving just exceeded all expectations. You had a series of events, a perfect storm, if you would, and giving has not yet caught up to that. And it has had the additional challenge of having to deal with the inflation, the challenge of inflation that followed the COVID experience. This is the second year where inflation has taken a bite out of the total philanthropy. Okay, and you see the trends in giving. You see the broken line. That goes from left to right. You see that spike here. If you can see my cursor, the spike here of the COVID year, and where we got to 557 billion, and then you see the adjustment for inflation, the kind of gold or mustard colored line that shows you the spike in 2020, and then the movement till this past year. While there are peaks and valleys along the way, the trend line has been significantly north, and we would expect that as inflation, God willing, comes further under control, that the upward trend, even with the adjustment for inflation, will continue to go up. What we do see, however, is over the last 25 years or so, that giving in relation to gross domestic product, has stayed pretty constant between 2 and 2.1% of GDP, and so that's a positive. And you see the period of growth in the mid to late 90s, and then it leveled off over the last 25 years. So what are the first set of takeaways? That in point of fact, total giving increased in real current dollars in 2023, but when the impact of inflation, kind of doubled back and folded over it, that the adjustment took place, that total giving as a percentage of GDP has maintained itself, and that's a hopeful sign, and hopefully we'll be able to, as a society to push that higher, and create now with the challenges that are before us, to create some upward movement. And not just in the Jewish community, but in the broader community as well. So what are the sources of contributions? The preponderance of philanthropy has traditionally and continues to come from individuals. That's why the organizations that we work with, we always suggest that, yes, you want a diverse pool of individual and institutional giving, but at the same time, that much of the preponderance of giving does come from individuals and families, and that needs to be a significant part of an organization, mix of organization donors, both prospective and real, and in the synagogue setting, it's largely the case where giving comes almost exclusively from individuals and families. Where you see growth, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, is in foundations. A lot of that has taken place over the last 5 years, where philanthropy has been shifted from individuals to foundations. And one other aspect, which is not present here because it's a little bit harder, and I think Giving USA is looking for a way to integrate it more, to integrate it clearly and transparently into the reporting, is the impact of donor advised funds. And we'll make reference to that as we go forward. But donor advised funds is a whole other mechanism used by donors today to be able to implement their philanthropy. Unlike a family foundation or an institutional foundation, it's a little harder to put into the record keeping box. Looking at giving over the last 2 years. This is in current dollars. You see that the growth again has been in foundations and in corporations. That corporate giving has stayed relatively stable as a 1 or 2% of pre-tax income, but at the same time, corporations have many corporations have been very successful over the last 2 or 3 years in accumulating cash, and this is the result. The trend towards foundations, the trends among individuals to create family foundations, the growth of institutional foundations, and the growth of the experience of the growth of donor advised funds, as kind of a side story, has fueled this. If we look at it, against the adjustment for inflation, we see the growth that stays here. We see that the chunk, the bite that inflation has taken out of giving, the picture writ large over the last 2 years, a larger amount in 21 to 22, and a smaller amount in 22 to 23. But you see the bite that it took out of individual giving, and even a little bit in the last, in the most current year in foundations, but foundations and corporations still came out on the positive. The drop in bequests is a timing thing. They obviously not something that we can predict, and they go in peaks and valleys. And in terms of giving over the last 40 years, in terms of, and this is through with the adjustment for inflation, you see that you see the pretty steady rise. It mirrors that chart that you saw earlier, and you see even over the last 4 or 5 years, from 2019 to the end of 2023, that giving did increase significantly, and individuals and foundations remained the most significant component, the most significant source of giving nationwide. In terms of giving by source, you see that the trend over the from 1984 to now, over the last 40 years, where individuals, there weren't as many opportunities and perhaps the tax advantages 40 years ago of looking for other means of creating opportunities for philanthropy or to give your philanthropy. That 80 cents out of every dollar came from individuals. Here it's 11% less, with other options here, growing incrementally over time. That the growth in foundations in particular, and the almost mirrors percent for percent, and it's 11% drop in giving for individuals, a 10% rise in giving through foundations. So key takeaways in terms of kind of what the broader picture is, before we drill down a little bit, that growth was, that philanthropy was, and giving in general was flat. there is a need, obviously, to look at opportunities and ways to build it back up. But I believe as the impact of inflation lessens, and the significance of the COVID year of 2020 begins to pass into into memory, that the natural growth of philanthropy will overtake the declines. And as you saw, that foundation and corporate giving has increased even against the adjustment for inflation, while individual and bequest giving is slightly down. And as I said, we're still coming back from COVID-related giving. 2020 was the year to give and the year to be generous, if there was any year to give at all. And that was the kind of the standard bearer for the last couple of years, and against which so much is being compared. Here again, I wanted to make a reference to donor advised funds, because they are a tool that many individuals and families use, to organize their philanthropy. And essentially, donor advised fund is a fund, philanthropic tool that is managed by a third party. The information is not as easily accessible as it is by Giving USA for individual and foundation giving, which where they access IRS data. Donor advised funds are not set up that way. And so the information is less accessible. But yet philanthropy has stayed relatively consistent, even with the slight drops, that it continues to show an upward trend. And donor advised funds likely played a part in the decrease of individual bequest giving, but are part of the growth, perhaps in the background of the growth of foundation giving. But the entire impact is not yet known, and it will become known and clear over time as they continue to be an area of significant growth in the philanthropic sector. So now, in terms of recipient organizations, you see giving to religion, and this is obviously very very significant to our discussion today. That 25%, just about, of every philanthropic dollar goes to religion. Seemingly a very positive part of the picture. Go back several years, go back 20 years, go back more, and that was probably 2 times, or perhaps even more. That if you looked at this chart 2 decades ago, that you saw 50 cents on the dollar going to religion, and the rest of the pie chart was adjusted accordingly. Today, because of a variety of factors, one, the expansion of giving, and just more dollars are being given, and the giving to religion is staying relatively static, that the other sectors are overtaking, and just the fact that that we, I think, are all facing, as lay and professional leaders in synagogues across the country, that giving to religion is a more significant challenge today than perhaps it has been in the past. And if you take a look here at giving to religion, you do see a slight increase over the last 2 years, but you see the growth in other sectors. Particularly over the last 2022 to 2023, in that last 12 months, between the month that we're comparing against now, you see the growth in other areas. And this is where, as I was saying, that the marketplace has kind of crept up on giving to religion, where giving to religion is still growing, but growing at a much smaller rate. And you see here what I was talking about before, that if you look back 40 years, you see today that over this year is 24%. Over the last 5 years, giving to religion is about 26%. Go back 40 years to the mid 80s, and you see giving to religion at 57%. So more than twice what it is now. And you see that that other areas have grown, step by step in these 5-year chunks. Over time, you see that that education has stayed relatively constant, that human services has grown, and of course giving to foundations, which has funded and which has funded the growth in foundations as people transfer money into those foundations. That's counted as philanthropy as well. And you see foundations, from a small percentage here to a much more significant percentage, going from 6% in 1984-85 to 15% or 13%. I apologize, in the last 5 years. Again, over the 40-year picture, you see the continued upward trend in current dollars. You see the impact of inflation over that 40-year period, and you see that giving to religion, has stayed pretty much on the uptick. In terms of the actual dollars put into it, but the rate of growth has not been as substantial, and other sectors of the philanthropic marketplace have seen greater growth. And here, just to show you, where, as that plays out, you see the changes in giving to other sectors. Look at education over the 40-year term. Look at giving to health over the 40-year term, and to human services, and to other sectors. You see how giving to religion, has kind of suffered a bit, and this is not something that is a challenge only to the Jewish community. It's a challenge across denominations and across faiths, and it, obviously fundraising is still possible. There's a lot of very successful fundraising happening across the faith-based community, across the Jewish community, for a variety of things. But as we're going to talk about in a moment, the approach to how it's done, and the message that all these numbers are giving us, is clear in terms of how we need to approach it. So a few takeaways, that giving to religion has decreased about 4% in the last 2 years, given the adjustment for inflation. Yet it is actually, as you saw, it's increased in current dollars by nearly 8% over the same time span. So people are still investing in religion, not at the pace that they may be investing in other things, but success obviously is still feasible. And then, as you saw over the 40-year trend, that there's been a market decrease. In giving to religion. It's still the largest chunk. I'm not sure if we projected ahead 5 years what it would look like, but for now, and probably for the next year or two, it still will remain the greatest single destination of philanthropic dollars. So, American Jewish philanthropy. So if I don't know if people were familiar, I'm happy to share it with you, offline, that there was a study that was commissioned by the Ruderman Family Foundation earlier in 2023. It was before the events of October 7th, this is part of the backdrop to giving in the Jewish community, and it kind of brought to light many of the things that we were thinking. It kind of said them out loud, but they do provide some direction and some pathway to where institutions in the Jewish community, as we deal with a fluid situation in Jewish philanthropy today, how to make decisions, and what to consider in terms of structure and messaging and projection and strategic direction, and all the things that need to be considered as significant fundraising goes forward. So in terms of American Jewish philanthropy, a couple of important facts. Jewish donors are very generous, in broad terms across denominational and faith lines. 2/3 of all Jews give to non-Jewish causes. less than half give to religious organizations. That has probably not changed that much over time, but it's pretty mirrored, against those statistics, that as giving has expanded in other places, it's kind of overtaken given to religious institutions, and only 2 out of 5, or maybe 2 out of 5, 40% of donors in the Jewish community support their congregations. I apologize for putting that in the negative. Jews are philanthropic, that it continues to be a strong trend in the Jewish community, that there is stronger Jewish affiliation and identification associated with higher rates of giving in the American philanthropic marketplace, and that's giving to both those Jewish and the non-Jewish causes. And the largest gifts from Jewish households, from those 40%, from the 2 out of 5, are often directed to their local congregations, and particularly now we see a little bit of a trend where the synagogue is becoming what I would call a foundational institution in the community. This may be a moment where synagogues might have an opportunity to take a little bit more assertive tack in speaking to their members about their needs and expectations in the future, and what the synagogue of the future is going to look like. We can't have this conversation without talking about anti-Semitism as a factor in giving today. The Ruderman study gave voice to what we already knew intuitively, that those who report experiences or concerns with anti-Semitism give more to Jewish causes. The question is particularly, and this was, as I said, done before the events of October 7th. The question, and it impacted even more profoundly in the wake of October 7th and the war in Gaza. And the question now is whether it will have long-term effect on giving. Oftentimes things spike and then they settle back into the previous pattern. We'll have to wait and see. We don't know yet. Families, just another important fact where Jewish philanthropy has some significance. In families where both partners identify as Jewish, they tend to give more to both Jewish and non-Jewish causes. That is, I can talk about circumstances where that was or was not the case in real life, kind of topless terms. But over the breadth of the Jewish community, those are the numbers that they did come up with. Ashkenazi households are more likely to give higher amounts in focused and directed giving. Mizrahi households, Sephardic households, more likely to give higher amounts to Israel-focused causes. Which is something that we see all the time. What does this mean? As we come to the purpose, really of our discussion today, what does this mean for my synagogue? Because the challenges of fundraising are not going away, and we need to find ways as concerned Jewish citizens and concerned Jewish citizens who believe in the centrality and relevance of the synagogue to Jewish life. How do we function? How do we continue to succeed? How do we advance in an environment where giving to religion is contracting, where levels of affiliation are contracting along with it? And this is not something that's particular to the Jewish community. It's really across all faith lines. In order to think about and contextualize how they relate to their constituents. Many synagogues, as you know, and there might be those that are either have made that transition or considering it. Many synagogues are shifting away from the traditional membership model to an annual giving model. Putting the synagogue into a different framework, where it's more into the competitive fray of Jewish communal life, and I believe in a place where it can more substantially make its case, and find the level of again, in a defined community, to make its case more directly, and more in a more focused way to its membership community, however that's ultimately defined. But at the same time, it can't just rely on successes of the past. It needs to be able to have some measure of strategic direction, some measure of vision, some measure of a look at its horizon. What is the synagogue of the future? And we harp on that. What does the synagogue of the future look like? What are we looking like 2 and 5 and 10 years hence? And when you think about the synagogue of the future, who does this speak to? Is it speaking to your community today? Is it speaking to your community of tomorrow? What role will it play? What role will it play in the community going forward? Not just for its core members and the committed core, who are part of what I'd say the core business of the synagogue, and that is prayer, education, community gathering. But what role does it play in the broader community? As a purveyor of Jewish programming, purveyor of Jewish identity and connection, in a much broader way going forward. And so now, let's talk for a minute about what happened in the last quarter of 2023, and how it affected fundraising. What does this mean for my synagogue? Well, emergency fundraising changed the dynamic. The emergency fundraising that was undertaken by JFNA and other large legacy organizations did impact upon the fundraising environment in the immediate aftermath, in the 3 or 4 months, profoundly, in the 3 or 4 months after the attacks and the war began. But over that time, and as 2023 transitioned into 2024, many of those commitments were beginning to get satisfied and paid off, and the needs of the community, beyond the importance of supporting Israel, which cannot be diminished, that the needs of the community began to reemerge. And the discussions that institutions were having at the time of the October 7th attacks began to have begun to resurface, and discussions are taking place now in 2024. So opportunities. October 7th notwithstanding, and the emergency campaigns notwithstanding, I can't tell you how many times over the course of a career I have been asked by particularly synagogue leaders that are sensitive to the ups and downs of the synagogue calendar. Is this a good time to start a campaign? Do we have to wait until this or that? Do we have to wait until after Passover? Do we have to wait until after high holidays? And my answer, unless there is a true and profound obstacle that stands in front of you, there's always going to be some outside factor. There's always going to be a calendar factor that's going to make you hesitate. And say, to yourself and perhaps to your colleagues, this may not be the time for a campaign, but on a certain level, it is a trap. And because there's always going to be a reason why this is not a good time. And if there's a profound and compelling reason for a campaign to go forward, if there's a need that needs to be met, if there's a level of clarity about what that need is, and the expectation of the community for it to be addressed, and for the success of the community today and going forward, if that means that it will improve and build the community in a variety of ways, then consideration needs to be taken about how and when and carefully and thoughtfully move forward in a way that will make sense. And particularly in an environment here where there are so many unknowns, the needs of the community remain. And I know it's difficult, and I know that it's a bit more confusing, and it's a bit less formed. But there, if, as I said, if there's a compelling need and a compelling reason to go forward, it's important to be able to find a way how to do it. You can conduct an annual campaign alongside a high holiday appeal, alongside a special campaign, and all are important and all are essential and all address a separate and distinct objective, but they can be coordinated, and they can be and they can be done correctly, and they can be done in such a way when they not only don't hurt each other, but at the end of the day, raise the level of giving and raise the level of support across the board. And that is oftentimes, more often than not, that is the case, where fundraising becomes a part of the internal discussion inside of the synagogue community, and different campaigns not only coordinate and learn to coexist, but do derive energy from each other. Okay. So, and then along the lines of opportunities, that particularly today, synagogues are increasingly seen as a safe place to be Jewish. That people are more hesitant to wear a Jewish star out or some type of Jewish symbol. Not the case in a synagogue. I spoke before, and here's the reference again, to if you're finding a way to create ballast for increasing support for Israel and Jewish needs across the country, across the world, etc., that you need strong foundational Jewish community institutions in order to be able to create a platform for that. If the Jewish community is not focused, if there isn't a place for people to come together and talk about those things, and create priorities, and in a way that is least competitive, and does not take a dollar away from another, this is the place to do it. And they can succeed in a place where campaigns now, and as they always have been, focus on building connection and building community. If a capital campaign is about building a building and not enhancing the community, take a deep breath and figure out how that goal is going to be achieved. How expanding, building, reconstructing your building is going to make your community better. Because why do people give? People give basically for two reasons. One, because of who asks. Okay, everybody around this table, I believe, will agree that who asked is extremely important. The other is people give because they feel that the funds that they give, particularly in the synagogue setting, are going to make the Jewish life for themselves, for their family, for their community better. That it's going to represent and reflect an investment in the future of their Jewish community, so that they can take that look over that 2 or 5 or 10 or generational horizon and say, that my investment was well used, and it was worth the stretch to enable my community to succeed. And of course, when people feel good about the institution and the role that it plays in the community, that constituents will support you, not only with dollars, but with their leadership and with their involvement. So, in terms of next steps, in terms of what we might think about, what we might do, and what needs to be on the mind of synagogue leadership today is number one, find your focus. what campaign or campaigns do you need to focus on in the next 1 or 2 years? What are the things that are important to your community that need to be addressed today? Is there a special project to tackle, such as endowment development or a capital campaign to improve your building and to improve your facility, because those compelling needs are there and are need to be addressed in order for the community to advance. Be clear as to what those dollars will achieve. Be clear and transparent at all times. As people have heard me say, both in writing and in presentation, that as we know that the wealth over the past 5 years has remained relatively relatively stable and even grown. American society remains a very generous and very philanthropic society. But one of the greatest legacies of COVID has been the due diligence, that people require clarity, and they require transparency and openness in order to be able to say, if I invest my dollars, can I be sure that those dollars will go to the purposes for which they were intended? And that is something that every institution, synagogues and not, need to address in order to build and retain and capture the confidence and comfort and participation of their community. You need to understand the community. The community, your communities are assemblages of people. The people are different. They're different generations than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And they should give you, the nature of the membership cohort today should give you hopefully a picture into what the synagogue would look like going forward. So what is it that your community is going to look like? What do you need to do now in order to prepare your institution for what it may need to do 10 years from now? If you're growing an endowment, how do you create an endowment that will be directed enough to be able to achieve something, but at the same time flexible enough that a board of 10 years from now or 15 years from now doesn't have to deal with the being relegated to a very narrow purpose, which may or may not be relevant to Jewish life in that community at that time or going forward. And then, the needs of the Jewish community are many. So how will you meet multiple needs and expectations? We span many generations now, and that creates differences in how we raise money. It creates differences in how we meet needs, how we think about what our constituencies are, what the expectations are in terms of the role of the synagogue in the community. These are all questions that I'm sure everybody around the table is thinking about, and these become core issues as fundraising campaigns are considered and structured and implemented. You need to have a plan. All right. What does your synagogue of the future look like? Does it have that strategic direction? All right. To just want to do something and then we'll figure it out later doesn't work anymore. What will the dollars raised be used for, and why are those items or activities important? These are simple questions that, if answered and answered directly, are the building blocks for success. And the building blocks for that community connection that we talked about a moment ago. So the key questions are, number one, what does success look like? And that needs to be defined in advance. Two, what will your congregation's campaign accomplish? All right. If you want people to give because they want to make their community better, how is the community going to improve? Have you done your research? All right. Do you know what people are thinking and what they might be prepared to invest in this or that or the third thing? Where are the heads of your constituents and your major donors today? And have those major donors and significant opinion leaders and the congregation at large signed on to what you as a leader and the leadership cohort believe are important for the future of the congregation, and are you equipped and positioned to succeed? And if you think about these 5 questions, these are the core questions that every synagogue leader and leadership teams and boards and executive committees need to think about as they go forward, and build their futures. And this is where I want to leave it and say thank you. We have 10 or 15 minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions, I'll take down the presentation, and so everybody can see one another. I will ask anybody to anybody who has any questions, raise your hand, and I'll try to get to everybody. So please. Okay, everything was that clear, huh?
Sorry, I had a issue unmuting. So I have a question. Do you have any kind of I don't know, expectations or rules of thumb or metrics about what amount of fundraising one could expect from a given congregation or a typical congregation? Is it, maybe based on membership, maybe based on something else?
It's a good question. Yes, we're a great believer in research and being able to take a kind of careful look at your congregation. That no research tool is perfect, but it gives you at least a start to understand what the capacity is in your within your collection of households, so that if you were to do something or introduce a concept, what's your starting point. But I will tell you that it's not about the wealth necessarily only. Obviously, you can't dismiss it; it's an important component. But it's also about the selling proposition. What is it, and the value proposition, which then leads into the selling proposition. What is it that you're proposing to the congregation that meets the milepost that we talked about a minute ago? Is it something that's relevant? Is it something that's necessary? That to raise money because we need more money may be true. But I think that people will need and do need a clear roadmap of where all this is going, and what's expected of them, and that takes some communication, it takes some outreach, but there is the ability to do a scan of your congregation to get a kind of an empirical look at what the wealth might be. It's imperfect, partly because of not everybody has their wealth or financial capacity in the same places. Some people have monies in trusts. Some people have monies in donor advised funds. So it's not always as accessible and understandable. But it gives you a general sense of where your starting point is. So long answer to a short question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Andrew Altman has his hand up.
Hi, thanks. A lot of our members, like probably a lot of people on here, we know a lot of our members give so much more money to Philly Orchestra, Jefferson Hospital, PBS than they do to our synagogue, to KI. So we've talked to them about this, and we're trying to sort of suss that out. And obviously, those institutions have larger budgets. But what do you find is a good way of sort of pushing them, encouraging them to give us a lot more as well?
Well, one of the reasons why people give to those other institutions is because those institutions have invested a lot of resources in putting their value proposition out there. Why is it important to support a major hospital system? You may have been a patient, a friend or family member may have been a patient, so that makes a lot of sense. People have interests, and what we need to do is you need to think about what is it about your congregation that makes you unique? What is it about the congregation that is compelling enough that it might, at least for a moment in time, and hopefully going forward, help congregants rearrange their priorities. And it is a matter of priorities. And so that I think that there needs to be some communication from the inside out, and communication with your congregants, with your households, as to what is it that the congregation means to them, and what it brings to them, and what the most important things, what are the most important things that they expect from the congregation, and what do they want the congregation to provide to them going forward. It's not just a matter of kind of trial and error, and let's see if this might work or that might work, but it's really a matter of doing some both empirical and anecdotal research, and kind of getting into the heads of your congregants, and understanding what it is that they might that might appeal to them, and may take some dollars that may go to something that they supported last year, and move it into something that the synagogue is asking them to do today. Okay.
Thank you.
Stephen, German.
Just easy question. Just wondering if there might be if you might post your slides with that, and give us a link to them.
Sure, no problem. And we're recording, so I will I'll make sure the link is made available.
Thank you.
Sure, Dale.
Mine is always also probably a simple one, and can be handled offline, but you mentioned the shift from membership based to giving based.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that defines that somehow, or describes what that means and how to implement such a thing?
Well, yeah, this is something that is under discussion, in congregations across the country. I'm sure that we can get you some resources that would define that, and kind of structure it, and it's not something that happens that happens that you turn off the switch here and turn the switch on there. It really is it's a process that happens over a little bit of time, that I think in a sense will ultimately align the interests of the congregation with the interests of its constituents. Look at the generational transition over the past 2 generations. From the post-World War II, post-Holocaust generation, to the baby boomers, to the millennials, and to the Gen Xers, who are now really the ones who are emerging into leadership, the 45 to 55, 60-year-olds. And people are less inclined, in the current generation, in the Gen X and millennial cohorts, to the much less inclined to join, much less inclined to be members of something. They will support. It's very generous. They're very generous generation, particularly the Gen Xers. The millennials haven't yet kind of grown into their full giving potential. But the proposition needs to be different, and that's part of what's driving this transition in synagogue life. To be able to meet the changes out in the community, to more closely, as I said, more closely align with what the interests and predilections of the giving, or the broader constituency might look for. Yeah, Sharna, you're muted.
Sorry, just to put a little context on this also for those on the call. Our congregation is currently working with Avram and Ross and the Lapin group right now, and as we begin a capital campaign. And I had a question, because one of the things that we found in the research that you did is that one of our three areas that we want to put the money that we raise into is an endowment, that will help support us through the future. And you had said the congregation had seemed very positive about making the endowment want to support rabbi and clergy salaries, which is important. But I was interested when you said, you have to make sure not to make those things too narrow because things change over time. And my concern is, the endowment has possibilities to be many things. We're a very clergy, a very rabbi-centric congregation. And so right now, that's great, but we've had times when rabbis are less popular, more popular, and when there have been issues and things like that. So I'm thinking that maybe a broader endowment. Part of it could go to rabbi, especially if we're only going to take 5 to 8% out of it a year or something. Yeah, 5. So what would even though our congregation, because somebody suggested it to them, I think, that we have this endowment for the rabbi. What do you think about, in our particular case, we're doing a little consulting now on our contract with you,
Sure.
making ours a broader endowment?
Well, that depends on what you see the needs as becoming. Obviously there was a voice in the congregation, that spoke to the desire to always have the ability to get the best clergy possible. And that, I think, was the motivator behind that voice around the chair in rabbinics or whatever you end up calling it. The clergy endowment. The notion of broadening the definition of the endowment, comes with it may give you a little more flexibility, but also at the end of the day gives you less money, and less money to invest in various things. The synagogue will always need a rabbi,
Or a senior clergy. Many synagogues are going
or but some spiritual leadership,
right.
In whatever form it may end up being. But the other elements of the congregation, what the educational structure looks like, what the communal structure looks like, what the lifelong learning might look like, what education, and community engagement might look like. Those are going to evolve over time. And that's what I was talking about most, that something that's necessary now, might change or evolve, 10 years from now. And that's why, always stress, take a look into the future. Don't just look in the moment, but take a look into the future, particularly when you're structuring an endowment. So you're not binding yourself into a situation where the leadership has to, kind of navigate a narrow stream in order to be able to fund things which at that time, which at that future moment, are becoming essential. So I think it takes a bit of a little bit of projection and looking forward, and making choices, about where the money's ultimately going to go.
Thank you.
Sure. Rachel.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. My question is also about moving from more of a membership structure to an open annual giving structure. So if you have a dues focused model, where everyone knows it costs a few $1,000s per member unit to make this train go, then it's established among everybody how much it takes to pay into an organization. Now, when you are dealing with a growing younger populace coming into the temple, maybe millennials who have only started to flex their philanthropic muscles, who don't really have their sights raised in giving philanthropically at what we might consider the dues level, are there pitfalls in doubling down into an annual giving model where you lose that connection between what something costs versus what is a philanthropic statement for you and your family?
Well, a lot of congregations are transitioning into it by kind of defining the annual giving model, but creating a threshold, and say, can you meet this threshold? Can you make this a target or a minimum, so that you maintain your ability to keep funding the operation of the institution, and at the same time build build the presence and the connectivity, for the congregation, in the lives and engagement of the younger families that are coming in. And at the same time, you're also, speaking across the across generational lines, and speaking to people, of all capacities and all levels of means, and people, like in any other situation, should be asked to give what they're capable of giving, or as much as they're capable of giving, but not just in a kind of a loose, give whatever you can, but more, a guided process of, I hope you can consider a gift of X amount, so that ultimately, the operational needs of the congregation are met, and the investment, I think, in the next generation of providing the example, and to use your terminology, to get to the place where their philanthropic muscles are more fully developed, that this will become this will become more obvious, and integration into giving at a higher level, and the establishment of the priority and the connection between giving and the congregation, and their philanthropy, is going to be more deeply rooted. When it becomes a matter of, how much do I need to pay for dues this year? Like, what's my point of entry, and how much is going to be next year, and how much is going to be next year, and then, and as it it becomes different, then I'm giving from the heart, and I'm relating my philanthropy to something that I believe in. Yeah, Charna.
I was just going to say, Rachel, be very careful when you consider this. It's a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah,
We're trying to move away from that giving what you feel from your heart model, which we have given an amount every year of what we need from each membership unit to actually operate. And we have gotten our responses since we've been doing this for the last 10, 15 years, I think it is, Dale. People have given much less than the sustainable amount. And we are now in a position where people are used to giving less than the sustainable amount. And we're going to have to move back to a dues model probably, because we just can't afford to do it. It's created a huge deficit. So I would just say, be very careful how you structure it. Not that you can't do it, but make sure how you structure it is going to work, and make sure your messaging and your marketing makes it very clear what the expectations are.
And that's what I said. Charna is very correct. That it has to be carefully guided. That it can't be just an open process.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we've gone a few minutes over, but I appreciate everybody's participation. We have recorded this session, so it will be available, and I will send it out so that you can have it and use it in whichever way you like. I look forward to being in close touch, with anybody and everybody across this, across this table. So again, thank you very much, and I wish everybody an early Shabbat Shalom, and early happy July 4th, and have a wonderful afternoon, or if it's afternoon, I think, for everybody. So have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.